is that we're looking at a two-phase construction site in many of the so-called Inca stone monuments, perched over 9,000 feet above sea level in Peru's sacred valley. Alentitambo Temple of the Sun looks less like ancient masonry and more like a riddle carved in stone. It's an incredible feat of engineering, of design, of imagination. 6 towering andesite blocks, each weighing around 50 tons and harder than steel, locked together with joints so tight they seem drawn, not cut. Very large amounts of thermal heat have been applied to mold the stones in such a way that they fit perfectly, and so it really does raise a lot of questions. Somehow they were hauled 4 miles from distant quarries, dragged across a river, and pulled uphill using nothing but rope and Bronze Age tools. Now, 2025 laser scans and petrographic studies complicate the story. Oh, wow. It really reveals so much. Look, there's more. All over the top of this mountain, there's these little features, these terraces. It almost looks like a bunch of little buildings. Surfaces polished to a microscopic sheen. No visible tool marks. Hints of heat-altered stone. Erosion shaped by flowing water and exposure patterns, suggesting these blocks have faced the elements for up to 2 millennia. They choose specific places with sacred mountains, and they adapted the architecture to the nature, far longer than the Inca timeline comfortably allows. How 3D technology reframed an ancient mystery. There's a reason Cusco never loosens its grip on visitors. This isn't a city you simply walk through. It's one you read layer by layer. Inca stonework forms the base of Spanish churches. Colonial arches rise from pre-Columbian foundations, and every wall feels like a quiet argument between past and present. Exploring Cusco's architecture is less like sightseeing and more like time travel. And if there's one detail that keeps pulling people back, it's the stone itself, precise, defiant, and strangely alive. That obsession sharpens in the sacred valley about 60 kilometers northwest of the city, where Ollantaytambo sits at a natural choke point along the Urubamba River. What began as a fortified Inca town later became a ceremonial sanctuary dedicated to the sun god Ini. Even the name Ollantaytambo, drawn from Kua, reflects this celestial connection, often translated as place of the rising sun. But sunlight is no longer the only thing illuminating the site. In early 2025, something else began to shine a far harsher light. That year marked a turning point. Ground-penetrating radar, high-resolution 3D laser scanning, LA, and petrographic analysis were deployed across key sites in Peru with unprecedented precision. The tech largely reinforced what archaeologists already suspected at ONT. However, it did the opposite. The scans exposed details no one could comfortably explain. Tool marks didn't line up with known Inca bronze implements. Construction sequences appeared out of order. Most unsettling of all, certain stone surfaces displayed finishing techniques that don't correspond to any documented ancient method and still challenge modern replication. The data didn't just raise questions, it quietly undermined the foundation of the accepted narrative. What the findings really suggest is bold. Ollantaytambo may not be a purely Inca creation. Instead, the evidence points toward an older, unknown culture responsible for the most sophisticated megalithic core, with the Inca inheriting a partially completed site and attempting to finish and adapt work they did not fully understand. That possibility matters, because Ollantaytambo was never a secondary site. Positioned where the valley narrows, it functioned as a religious center, a fortress, and a strategic military stronghold. In 1537, it became the stage for one of the most remarkable moments in Andean history, when Meco Inca successfully repelled Spanish conquistadors. It remains one of the very few decisive indigenous victories against European forces. Yet for all its military significance, what truly captivates both tourists and scholars is the Temple of the Sun, perched high on the upper terraces. The structure features 6 massive monoliths standing upright in a precise row. Each stone rises roughly 13 feet tall and weighs close to 50 tons, carved from red, pureritic andesite, a volcanic rock with a hardness comparable to steel. These blocks are not just large, they are unnervingly perfect. Their surfaces are flat, polished, and fitted together with joints so tight that even a knife blade can't slip between them. This isn't rough masonry refined over time. It's stonework finished to a level you'd expect from industrial machinery. And then comes the part that refuses to sit quietly. These 50-ton blocks were quarried at Cachicata, more than 4 miles away across rugged terrain over the Urubamba River and from an elevation roughly 0 feet higher than the temple itself. Conventional archaeology credits the site to Pachacuti, who reigned from around 1438 to 1471 CE. The most successful Inca ruler is probably an Inca conqueror is probably Topayapanqui, Pachacutec's son, who has conquered tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kilometers square. According to this long-accepted account, the Inca quarried the stones, hauled them using ropes, wooden rollers, and raw manpower, then achieved their legendary precision through patient grinding and endless trial and error. Fitting. For decades, that explanation was considered sufficient. The scans suggest it isn't. Researchers digitally mapped every stone surface at the temple of the sun and surrounding structures, aiming to identify tool marks, construction order, and working methods. What they found was both extraordinary and deeply inconvenient. The 6 monoliths, in particular, show surfaces so smooth that no tool marks appear at all, even under microscopic, 3-dimensional analysis. The stones look less carved than transformed. Petrographic testing confirms they are natural stone, not cast material. Yet, their surface characteristics don't match any known ancient or modern stonework technique. Lead geologist Dr. Carlos Mendoza described the texture as almost vitrified with crystalline structures, suggesting exposure to intense heat or an unknown surface altering process. In simple terms, the stone behaves in ways we don't understand. Meanwhile, other stones at the site tell a very different story. Upper terraces and secondary walls display visible tool marks, rougher finishes, and less precise joints. Features entirely consistent with known Inca construction methods. The contrast is impossible to ignore. At Ollantaytambo, 2 radically different levels of craftsmanship exist side by side. That split strongly suggests at least 2 construction phases carried out by builders with vastly different capabilities. The most advanced megalithic work appears older with later Inca construction added around and atop it, a pattern echoed in Cusco's walls and other Peruvian megalithic sites. And that is what the scans finally quantified. Ollantaytambo is not a single story carved in stone. The walls are put together with blocks of stone, weighing 50 or 100 tons. It is a layered conversation between civilizations, one we are only just beginning to hear clearly, where the construction story breaks down. One of the quietest but most revealing clues at Ollantaytambo isn't found in the finished walls. It's found in the stones that never made it there. At the Cachicata quarry, dozens of massive blocks lie frozen in time, caught mid-extraction as if work simply stopped. Some are nearly freed from the bedrock, their outlines fully defined. Others look barely started, still rough and tentative. What immediately stands out is that the same 2-tier pattern seen at the temple appears here as well. Certain surfaces show an advanced level of refinement with minimal visible tooling, while neighboring stones bear crude percussion marks consistent with basic hammering. The contrast isn't subtle, it's unmistakable. Even more intriguing are the stones scattered along the ancient transport route between quarry and temple. These blocks were not discarded at random. They sit deliberately placed, abandoned midway through the journey, as though a complex operation was suddenly interrupted. One enormous stone, estimated at nearly 70 tons, rests halfway down the mountain slope. It is partially shaped, seemingly ready for transport. Yet, it never moved another inch. Another block lies stranded at the edge of the Urubamba River, close enough to suggest it reached the most dangerous stage of the journey, then stopped. Dr. Carlos Mendoza's team conducted extensive ground-penetrating radar surveys along the entire transport corridor, searching for physical evidence that might explain how stones of this scale were moved. If ramps, roaded, or temporary engineering structures had existed, traces should have remained. They found none. No compacted earth layers that would suggest prepared ramps. No stone alignments hinting at constructed roadways. No buried features consistent with the massive infrastructure such a project would require. The landscape is strangely silent. This rock weighs about 20 tons. This is minuscule compared to many of the rocks at Sacsayhuaman. Today we have heavy machinery to move such stones, but in the ancient times, especially the Inca, they would have used massive human workforces working for massive amounts of time. The conventional explanation holds that the Inca used wooden rollers, plant fiber ropes, and hundreds of workers pulling in unison on flat ground. Experimental archaeology has shown this method can work, but the ant route is anything but flat. From the quarry, the path descends nearly a saki, 0 feet down steep terrain, crosses a major river, then climbs roughly 400 feet to the temple terraces. This isn't just difficult, it's dangerous. Moving a 50-ton stone downhill is a battle against gravity itself. The stone wants to accelerate, and controlling that descent requires enormous braking force. Plant fiber ropes have limited tensile strength, and a single failure would be catastrophic. A runaway block of that size becomes an unstoppable projectile capable of obliterating everything in its path. Modern heavy transport operations tackling similar terrain rely on steel cables, mechanical braking systems, and strict safety controls. The idea that such descents were repeatedly managed using rope and wood without recorded disaster stretches credibility. The river crossing presents its own nightmare. Even at low flow, the Urubamba is a substantial obstacle. To move 50-ton stones across it, builders would need either a reliable ford with exposed bedrock strong enough to support the load or a temporary bridge engineered to withstand extreme weight. The presumed crossing point was carefully surveyed. Bedrock exists, but its configuration is far from ideal for megalithic transport. A bridge is theoretically possible, but that introduces another problem. Constructing a structure capable of supporting such weight, then dismantling and rebuilding it repeatedly for multiple stones adds an enormous amount of labor that must fit somewhere into the historical timeline. And that timeline is already under strain. The reign of Pacuti lasted roughly 33 years. During that time, he expanded the empire, reorganized its administration, rebuilt Cusco, constructed Machu Picchu, and initiated work at multiple major sites, including Ollantaytambo. Even under optimistic assumptions, the sheer volume of megalithic stonework at the Temple of the Sun represents years of sustained effort. The 6 monoliths alone weigh around 50 tons each. It's amazing all the weight of the stones. You know, it's difficult definitely for any human to move even in groups. If quarrying, transporting and positioning a single block took even 6 months, a conservative estimate, that's 3 years of work just for those stones, excluding all other construction. But the scans introduced a new complication. Analysis of soil layers, weathering patterns, and stone-to-one contact points indicates the 6 monoliths were placed at the same time or very close to it. They were not added gradually over decades. They belong to a single construction phase. That level of simultaneous placement would require multiple quarry teams, parallel transport operations, and highly coordinated lifting and fitting, all happening at once. The logistical complexity begins to rival or even exceed what is typically attributed to Inca engineering. And this was shaped with stone tools. This speaks to the monumental effort and genius. Unless the stones were not placed by Pachacuti's builders at all, unless they were already there. This is where the evidence keeps pointing. The Inca may not have created the megalithic core of Ollantaytambo. They may have inherited it partially finished, already ancient, and built around it as best they could. The unfinished stones, the abandoned blocks, and the missing infrastructure all make more sense under this model. The most unsettling confirmation came from the petrographic analysis. Microscopic samples taken from stone surfaces were examined for crystal structure, weathering patterns, and trace elements. What the team found did not fit comfortably within known Inca construction timelines or techniques. And that discovery pushed the mystery of Alentitambo into an entirely new territory. When time leaves its fingerprints, weather, water, and the mathematics in stone. If stone could age quietly, the 6 monoliths attempt never got the memo. Their surfaces don't just sit there, they tell stories. And according to the recent analysis, those stories may be far older than anyone expected. The weathering patterns on the 6 monoliths suggest prolonged exposure to the elements, well beyond the roughly 5 centuries that have passed since the reign of Pachacuti. In particular, the rate at which feldspar crystals have broken down within the andesite points to a minimum exposure window of 1,500 to 2,000 years, possibly longer. This doesn't necessarily tell us when the stones were carved, but it does strongly suggest they have been sitting in the open far longer than conventional timelines allow. Dr. Carlos Mendoza, ever cautious, emphasized that weathering calculations are not exact clocks. Climate variations, temperature swings, wind patterns, and micro-environmental effects can accelerate or slow deterioration. Still, the gap is too large to ignore. Either the stones are much older than we think, or they experienced environmental conditions far harsher than anything recorded in recent centuries. Then there's the water. Several of the megalithic stones show erosion patterns consistent with sustained flowing water, not just rain. Channels, smoothing, and directional wear suggest movement. Water with force behind it. That's a problem because Ollantaytambo sits on a mountainside, not in a floodplain. For these stones to be shaped by flowing water, something extraordinary must have happened. One explanation points deep into geological time. The Andes are known for catastrophic flooding events tied to glacial lake outbursts, seismic activity, and sudden dam failures. Geological records confirm that massive surges of water have periodically swept through high-altitude valleys. If such an event reached the Temple of the Sun terraces nearly 9,500 feet above sea level, it would leave exactly the kind of erosion seen on the stones. And if that happened, it means the monoliths were already standing there when the flood came, pushing their exposure and possibly their construction back thousands of years. As if that weren't enough, the team turned its attention to one of Alentitambo's long-standing curiosities, the stone knobs. These small protrusions found on many blocks across the site have puzzled researchers for decades. The common assumption was practical, that they served as anchor points for ropes during transport or alignment aids during placement. It sounds reasonable until you look closely. The high-resolution 3D scanning revealed that the knobs on the most precisely finished stones show no signs of rope wear whatsoever. No abrasion, no compression marks, no friction scars. If ropes had been looped around them under tension, the damage would be unmistakable. Instead, the knobs appear pristine. That raises an uncomfortable question. If they weren't used for transport, then how were these stones moved? Modern stone movers rely on drilled anchor points, steel loops, and specialized grips. None of that evidence appears here. One possibility is that the knobs were added later, carved by Inca workers attempting to imitate features they saw on older stones without understanding their original purpose. That would explain why the knobs exist and why they show no functional wear. But the surprises didn't stop there. Laser scanning revealed that the 6 monoliths are arranged with striking mathematical precision. Their spacing follows specific ratios. Their heights, though they appear irregular at first glance, vary according to a deliberate numerical pattern. Even their widths progress in a structured sequence. This wasn't visual guesswork, it was geometry. Dr. Ana Rivera, a mathematician consulting on the project, analyzed the data and found that the spacing ratios between the stones closely approximate 1:1. See sense det zweck, the golden ratio, with an accuracy of about 2%. The height variations align with square roots of successive integers. These relationships are not accidental. They reflect intentional planning guided by mathematical principles. What makes this especially intriguing is that the golden ratio appears elsewhere in ancient architecture. It has been associated sometimes contentiously with structures like the Great Pyramids of Giza, the Parthenon, and even the Sun Temple at Mesa Verde. Scholars debate whether its presence in Greek architecture was deliberate or an aesthetic byproduct, but a 2017 study found clear geometric planning using the ratio among the ancestral PBLO builders of Mesa Verde. In Peru, similar proportions appear at Machu Picchu and Cusco's walls and now clearly quantified at Ont. So what does that mean? Either different cultures across the world independently arrived at the same mathematical principles because humans naturally gravitate towards certain proportions, or there was some form of knowledge transmission we don't yet understand, possibly inherited from an earlier shared source. Whatever the answer, the stones at Ollantaytambo are no longer just impressive feats of labor. They are records of time, water, and mathematics etched into rock, waiting patiently for us to catch up. The polishing, the quakes, and what lies beneath. One of the most unsettling discoveries from the investigations at Alentitambo isn't how massive the stones are, it's how smooth they feel. Some of the monoliths at the Temple of the Sun are polished to a near-mirror finish, reflecting light with a subtle sheen that feels wildly out of place on a mountainside carved centuries ago. Achieving that level of polish on andesite is no small feat even today. Modern stone finishing relies on rotating diamond-impregnated pads, steadily finer grits, sustained pressure, and powered motion. Even with industrial tools, producing a uniform mirror-like surface can take hours. Which raises the obvious question, how did Inca or possibly pre-Inca builders? And so here we see an Inca wall and a much older megalithic work. Some say this is a quarry of some kind, but the stone taken from there has not been found. Accomplish something comparable using bronze tools, stone abrasives, and muscle alone. The traditional answer has always been patience. Months or even years of careful hand grinding, working the surface bit by bit with sand and water. But there's a problem with that explanation. Experimental archaeology shows that hand grinding leaves behind unmistakable signatures, directional scratches, subtle wyness, uneven polish, and microscopic evidence of repetitive motion. The polished surfaces at Ollantaytambo show none of this. No directional bias, no uneven wear, just smooth, consistent finish across entire stone faces. That kind of uniformity suggests either a rotating polishing method or a technique that simply doesn't behave like manual abrasion. Over the years, this has given rise to more speculative ideas. Some researchers have pointed to ancient stone softening theories, proposing that early Andean cultures may have known chemical or thermal treatments capable of temporarily altering stone hardness. Local legends even speak of plant extracts said to soften rock like clay. Fascinating stories, but stories nonetheless. The team took these claims seriously enough to test them. Stone surfaces were analyzed for chemical residues, trace elements, and signs of artificial alteration. Nothing conclusive was found. No lingering compounds, no clear thermal markers. Either such techniques never existed or any evidence of them has completely degraded over time, leaving no physical trace behind. For now, the polish remains unexplained. Then the scans revealed something equally revealing, but far less mysterious. Signs of damage. Several megalithic stones display ancient crack patterns consistent with seismic activity. This isn't surprising. The Andes are one of the most seismically active regions on Earth, and Ollantaytambo has endured countless earthquakes over millennia. What is surprising is how those cracks were treated. Rather than collapsing or being crudely patched, many fractures were repaired with carefully shaped stone inserts fitted tightly into the damaged areas. These repairs closely resemble the original construction techniques, though they are slightly less precise. The implication is subtle, but important. The people who made the repairs likely weren't the original builders. They were caretakers, maintaining structures they had inherited, rather than fully understanding how they were first made. What's more, the stones themselves appear engineered to survive earthquakes. Their precision fitting allows for microscopic movement during seismic events, dissipating energy rather than resisting it rigidly. Modern earthquake-resistant architecture follows the same principle. Structures that flex survive. Those that don't fail. The fact that many Spanish colonial buildings nearby were repeatedly destroyed and rebuilt, while the Inca-era stonework endured, says a lot about the sophistication of the original design. Did the ancient builders understand seismic engineering in theoretical terms? Or did they arrive at these solutions through centuries of observation and trial and error? Either way, the result is extraordinary. Structures that have survived potentially thousands of years of earthquakes with minimal failure. And just when it seemed the mystery had reached its limit, the ground itself offered another surprise. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in 2025 detected subsurface anomalies beneath visible structures. Attempt patterns emerged. Shapes consistent with buried walls, foundations, or architectural features now hidden beneath sediment and later construction. These are not random geological formations. They suggest earlier phases of building that were buried, abandoned, or intentionally covered before the site was reoccupied and built upon again. The research team proposed targeted excavations to investigate these anomalies, but the work remains unfinished. If confirmed, it would fundamentally alter the timeline of Tambo, revealing a site that was built, buried, reused, and rebuilt across multiple eras. Polished stone, earthquake scars, hidden structures below the surface. At Alentitambo, nothing exists in isolation. Every smooth surface, every repaired crack, every buried wall hints at a deeper story, one that refuses to stay neatly within the boundaries of known history. Layers of time, reconstructions, inheritances, and the mystery of Ollantaytambo. Today, we're at the huge Inca site of Ollantaytambo at the northern end of the sacred valley of Peru. The story of Ollantaytambo is not a single chapter. It's a palimpsest, a text written over again and again by different hands across centuries. This isn't unique to one site. Across the Andes, evidence of layered construction appears repeatedly. At Tiwanaku, for example, multiple building phases span centuries, even millennia. At Chaven de Huantar, subsurface structures predate the visible architecture, hiding ancient footprints beneath the familiar temples and plazas. In this context, the idea that Ollantaytambo contains hidden earlier phases is far from radical. It fits a pattern seen throughout Andean history. What makes Ollantaytambo exceptional is the contrast in craftsmanship. The megalithic core, the Temple of the Sun and its 6 monoliths, radiates a sophistication unmatched by the surrounding stonework. If these stones are indeed older than the Inca-era additions, then the story of advanced stonework in the Andes stretches back into civilizations we know surprisingly little about pre-Inca cultures such as Tiwanaku, Quaries, or even earlier largely forgotten peoples. Spanish chroniclers noted something fascinating about this inheritance. When asked who built the most impressive megalithic sites, the Inca themselves admitted they had not. They pointed to predecessors sometimes called the first people or connected to the creator god Viracha as the original builders. Modern archaeologists have often dismissed these accounts as myth or folklore. But what if they were reporting historical memory? What if rather than exaggerating, the Inca were accurately acknowledging that they inherited structures whose construction exceeded their own capabilities? The investigations lend weight to this possibility. The scans, petrographic studies, and weathering analyses all tell a consistent story. Ollantaytambo was constructed in multiple phases with differing levels of skill. The megalithic core shows extraordinary precision, mirror-smooth surfaces, and perfectly fitted joints while surrounding stones are rougher, less precise, and crudely added. This juxtaposition suggests inheritance rather than original creation. The Inca appear to have attempted to continue or complete work begun by an earlier culture rather than originating it from scratch. Dr. Carlos Mendoza summarized it succinctly. Ollantaytambo exhibits clear evidence of multiple construction phases using distinct techniques and achieving differing quality levels. The Temple of the Sun's monoliths may predate the Inca Empire, though by how much remains uncertain. Attributing all of Ollantaytambo to Pacuti and his 33-year reign becomes increasingly difficult when confronted with the physical evidence. These stones are not abstract concepts. They are real, measurable, and meticulously documented by modern science. Each monolith weighs roughly 50 tons, was transported 4 meters across the Urubamba River and up a mountainside, fitted with millimeter accuracy and polished to a mirror finish. 3D scans confirm their precision. Geological and petrographic studies reveal ancient weathering patterns inconsistent with a 5-century timeline. The conclusion is both humbling and unsettling. We do not fully understand how these stones were made, when they were made, or who made them. Conventional Inca explanations account for only part of the evidence. A model where the Inca inherited sophisticated stones from earlier builders fits the physical evidence more convincingly, but it forces us to accept that advanced engineering, precision fitting, and mirror polishing techniques existed in the Andes long before the empire we know. Ollantaytambo sits at unprecedented heights, its monoliths precisely aligned, their surfaces polished and smooth, the quality varying sharply between sections. The scans reveal the complexity, document the unmatched precision, and expose inconsistencies in the accepted timeline. They do not provide simple answers, but they do pose urgent, fascinating questions. Who built Ollantaytambo? When? How? Across layers of stone and time. The evidence points to multiple builders, possibly separated by centuries or even millennia. And despite our modern technology, we still cannot fully explain the most sophisticated work. The mystery of Ollantaytambo isn't just its awe-inspiring construction. It is understanding the minds, cultures, and techniques that made it possible. The 2025 scans didn't close the case. They opened it wider than ever before, more than stones, tunnels, terrain, and the genius of the Inca. When artificial intelligence was asked to weigh in on the mystery, it hesitated just briefly. The screen dimmed, then went blank, as if the system itself needed a moment to breathe while reaching across billions of archived papers, excavation reports, engineering models, and ethnographic records scattered around the world. 2 minutes passed. Then the display flickered back to life. The answer wasn't dramatic. It was unsettlingly simple. The monoliths at Alentitambo, particularly those forming the Temple of the Sun, were not the product of lost technology or forbidden knowledge. They were the result of an extreme, almost uncomfortable fusion of engineering discipline, raw human labor, and vast amounts of time. Not lost science, but lost patience. The process likely began far from the temple walls at andesite quarries across the Urubamba River. Andesite is unforgiving stone, harder than steel tools and resistant to clean breaks. Yet it yields slowly when struck with persistence. The Inca appear to have shaped these massive blocks almost completely at the quarry itself, reducing uncertainty later. Through endless cycles of hammering with harder stones, grinding surfaces against one another, and exploiting thermal shock by alternating fire and water, the blocks were coaxed, not forced, into their final forms. Precision came first, movement second. Getting the stones to the site was not a miracle of machines, but of physics and coordination. Without wheels, draft animals, or metal cranes, the Inca relied on human synchronization. Ropes woven from ichu grass, wooden rollers, sledges, prepared stone paths, and earthen ramps transformed impossible weight into slow, deliberate motion. Each pull was timed, each command rhythmic, turning hundreds of individuals into a single living engine. Some stones never made it. Abandoned blocks along the route suggest miscalculations, shifting terrain, and lessons learned the hard way. This was not a flawless system. It was an adaptive one. At the temple itself, the real obsession began. The famous razor-thin joints were not achieved by cutting once and setting forever. Stones were lifted, lowered, marked, ground, and tested repeatedly, sometimes dozens or even hundreds of times until surfaces met with near microscopic accuracy. Sand and water acted as abrasives, slowly erasing imperfections. The work advanced at a pace that would feel intolerable today, but this was craftsmanship measured in seasons, not hours. What truly made the feat possible was not technique, but organization. The Inca estate mobilized labor through the MTA system, drawing thousands of workers at specific times of year. Crews specialized naturally through repetition, some quarrying, others hauling, others fitting stone, while knowledge passed directly from experienced hands to new ones without blueprints or written manuals. When time is not money, perfection becomes attainable. That is why Alentitambo still feels impossible. Modern construction replaces labor with machines. The Inca replaced machines with planning, redundancy, and human synchronization. The shock is not that it could be done, but that anyone would choose to do it with such care. No anti-gravity, no visitors from the stars, just humans stretched to the outer limits of cooperation and persistence, leaving behind stonework so precise it still challenges our imagination centuries later. The mysteries of Alentitambo extend far beyond its awe-inspiring monoliths. For decades, researchers have puzzled over not just how the enormous stones were quarried, transported, and fitted with mind-boggling precision, but also over whispers of a hidden underground world beneath the heart of Cusco, the ancient capital of the Inca Empire. Now, thanks to a combination of archival research and modern technology, those whispers are becoming reality. Archaeologists Jorge Calero Flores and Mildred Fernandez Palomino recently confirmed the existence of a tunnel network connecting two of Cusco's most important Inca sites. The Temple of the Sun, partially destroyed and built over by a Catholic church during the Spanish conquest, and the sprawling Sakaiwaman Fortress, a stone giant perched over a mile away. Using acoustic prospecting and ground-penetrating radar, their team mapped a mile-long passageway roughly 5 feet wide and 5 feet tall, carefully constructed with stone walls, beams, and ceilings. The tunnel, known locally as the Chincana, likely runs directly under Cusco's modern streets, silently threading together the sacred city above. The purpose of the Chincana remains a tantalizing mystery. Was it ceremonial, defensive, or practical? Archaeologists plan to excavate key points to explore these passages fully. Even without access yet, the discovery adds another layer to our understanding of Inca ingenuity. They weren't merely masters of massive stones above ground. They reshaped the world beneath their feet as well. This subterranean engineering is inseparable from the broader brilliance of Inca architecture. Across the Andes, the Incas built in harmony with the natural landscape, seamlessly merging stonework with mountains, valleys, and bedrock. Mortless walls, carefully shaped stones, and dry-fitted masonry allowed buildings to blend with natural outcrops, conceal structural edges, and create the illusion that the land itself was sculpted into their designs. This was not just aesthetic, it was functional. By anchoring structures directly to bedrock and fitting irregular stones like pieces of a puzzle, the Inca created buildings capable of withstanding centuries of seismic activity. Their architectural philosophy extended beyond survival through royal estates, citadels, and sacred complexes. Inca rulers asserted political and spiritual authority, projecting power through the interplay of natural topography and monumental stone. Places like Chinro dramatized steep valleys with massive terraces, while Machu Picchu and Ollantaytambo showcased a precision that was as much about control over space and perception as it was about engineering. Inca architecture was propaganda in stone, a physical testament to the Sapa Inca's dominion and divine mandate. Together, the monoliths above ground and the tunnels below illustrate a civilization that mastered both scale and subtlety. They moved mountains literally and figuratively, sculpting earth, stone, and subterranean passageways into an empire that spoke to the intellect, the eyes, and even the imagination of those who walked these landscapes. Ollantaytambo, Cusco, and the Chincana tunnels remind us that human ingenuity often leaves traces in unexpected places. The Inca didn't just build. They orchestrated landscapes, monuments, and hidden passages that defy easy explanation. As modern science peels back layers of stone and soil, we are left with more questions than answers. Who truly engineered these marvels? How much of it remains undiscovered? And above all, what other secrets are waiting silently beneath our feet, shaped by hands that understood their world in ways we are only beginning to glimpse? In the Andes, every stone, tunnel, and terrace is both a puzzle and a story, an invitation to marvel, reflect, and continue the search for understanding. Please click the cards on the screen now for more interesting videos.